بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. ثم ما بعد. Inshallah, today we have Bab al-Khushu', the chapter on khushu', submissive solemnity. You could say also humbleness or humility and calmness. And in fiqh, we will go over some of the conditions, some of the prerequisites of the prayers, some of the shurut, the prerequisites, the conditions. These are the conditions of validity of the prayers. First, Bab al-Khushu', the chapter on submissive solemnity. Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah said, قال الله عز وجل ألم يأن للذين آمنوا أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق. Allah Almighty said, has the time not come for those who have believed that their hearts should become humbly submissive, and تخشع قلوبهم, that their hearts should have khushu', should become humbly submissive at the remembrance of Allah and what has come down of the truth. And what has come down of the truth in Surah Al-Hadid. Then he started to define al-khushu', and he said al-khushu' خمود النفس وهمود الطباع لمتعاظم أو مفزع وهو على 3 درجات. Khushu' is the inertness of the nafs and docility of the character before someone glorious or fearsome, and it is 3 levels. Al-khushu' هو خمود النفس وهمود الطباع. خمود النفس would be the inertness of the nafs, the inertness of the ego. And the humud al-taba' would be docility of the character. It is also important that you notice here that he started by humud al-nafs before he talked about humud al-taba'. Al-taba' is the outer, external character, and nafs is the inner soul, it is the ego. So humud al-taba', or basically humud al-nafs would be the lifelessness of the ego, the inertness, the lifelessness of the ego. It is broken. Humud al-taba' would be the docility of the character. You could say the humbleness, shyness. You know, it's like a character, someone who has like a shy, humble, sort of broken character. But it is important that we understand that this character is secondary to the internal experience. So the external manifestations of the character are secondary to internal experience. Once your character exceeds your internal experience, once the docility of your character had exceeded your internal experience, you're likely a munafiq. It is likely a show. Except if you are trying to train yourself, in certain regards, and you're truly doing it to basically tame the beast inside. You're forcing yourself to act a certain way. You're forcing yourself to act a halim. Although you're not really halim, you're not really forbearing, but you are forcing yourself in order to tame the internal beast, in order to tame your ego. So you are forcing yourself to act patient, to act courteous, to act forbearing, although none of this is really genuine. But you are doing this not to show off, but to basically tame the nafs inside by forcing it to behave in a certain way, hoping that one day this will become a second nature for the nafs, and it will become genuine, and it will become effortless. So you're acting as إنما العلم بالتعلم وإنما الحلم بالتحلم. The Prophet ﷺ said, ilm, or acquiring knowledge or becoming knowledgeable, is through learning, ta'allum. And becoming a halim or forbearing is through practice of forbearance, tahallum. So if that is what you're doing, then you're fine, but you have to be really honest with yourself, and this really needs to be what you're doing. It is not basically seeking flattery or praise or recognition from the people, but it is to behave yourself, to behave your inner self. The default, however, is that this character, this outer character, should be just basically a manifestation, an expression of the inner state. So that is khumud al-nafs came first, and then humud al-taba' came second. Khumud al-nafs, the inertness of the nafs, the lifelessness of the ego, was accomplished first, and then humud al-taba', the docility of character, humbleness, shyness, calmness of character, came second. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, and certainly if there is much to explain about this, but I'm just going to mention a few things. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu saw a young man who had his neck bent like this, like muta'ti'an raqabatahu. He had his neck bent down like this. So he said to him, straighten your neck. Khushu' is in the heart, not in the neck. Straighten your neck. Like, don't act, stop performing. Straighten your neck. Khushu' is in the heart, not in the neck. And that applies to so many things. Even when it comes to attire. It is questionable whether we actually should be wearing anything different from the general public or the everybody else, or not. And certainly the scholars have always basically anguished over this issue. Many scholars wore, distinctive clothes that were known for scholars of their time, so that, like Imam Malik would have the rationale of being wearing distinctive clothes so that ignorant people may come and ask you, and so on. And some of them had also the rationale of giving hayba to ilm, or respect to knowledge itself, regardless of their selves, or their not respect to themselves, but respect to knowledge itself. And there were many different rationales. But some of the scholars also said that any attire that would look different from the masses is thawb shuhra. Tabari used to have this position, that wearing an attire that is different from the masses is basically thawb shuhra, or an attire of fame, or attire to pursue fame, or to seek fame, celebrity, popularity. And it is quite an issue, but the more important thing is that you should give it up every once in a while, so that you're really not dependent on this attire, so that it is, you should wear regular street clothes every once in a while, so that it is not a dependency that you have on this attire for recognition, or for prestige, or haiba, or whatever. The bottom line is that all the external manifestations should be secondary. to the internal state of being, to the internal experience. And if they are ahead of your internal experience, the sole objective would be to behave your nafs, your inner self, by forcing your nafs to behave in a certain way externally, because that's what you can do. Like, you can't really work on your inner nafs internally. It is much harder. So you sort of externally force a certain behavior on yourself, hoping that one day this becomes a second nature of my nafs. One day it becomes genuine, it becomes true, it becomes for the sake of Allah, not in any way, shape, or form for ostentation or pretension. Then he said, this khushu' is 3 levels. الدرجة الأولى التذلل للأمر والاستسلام للحكم والاتضاع لنظر الحق. The first level is التذلل للأمر, showing humble submission to the commands. تذلل للأمر, showing humble submission to the commands. تذلل means humility. You show humility to the commands. Here it means showing humble submission to the commands. And humble submission to the commands is that you accept the commands of Allah without arguing. You don't argue with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you don't ask for too many details like the people of al-Baqarah, the cow, story of the people of the cow. قَالُوا ادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ يُبَيِّن لَنَا مَا هِيَ. Invoke your Lord to explain to us or clarify for us what it is like, what kind of cow it is. But you just say, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا, we hear and we obey, and you act upon the command without takalluf and without pretension. You just act with sincerity. And you act on the command also without technicality. And without, questioning even the Sahaba did not use to question the legal value of everything. This is wajib, this is mustahab, and so on. And the story of Jarir ibn Abdullah, whoever attended the khutbah yesterday, the khatib yesterday, was very good. Like his khutbah, he usually is relevant. Our khatib that we had here yesterday, I don't know his name, but I attended 3 of his khutbah, and he's usually very relevant. So he mentioned the story of Jarir ibn Abdullah and the horse, and certainly the story that comes in different forms, in different narrations. But Jarir ibn Abdullah and the horse, so Jarir went to buy a horse, and then he was asked for 300 dirhams, that's silver coins, and Jarir said to the man, whether he went back home and came back to the man, different stories, but the bottom line is Jarir said to the man, your horse is worth more than this. And then he kept on going back and saying to the man, your horse is actually worth more than this. Yeah, and every time he would tell him your horse is worth more than this, he would give him more money until he gave him $800. The asking price was $300. He's the buyer, and he keeps on telling the seller, no, you don't know the value of your horse. You don't know the value of your. Who of us would do this nowadays? Really, like if someone offers you their house for $100,000, and you really think it's worth, $150,000. Who's going to tell the seller, you actually don't know the value of your house? I would like to pay you a little bit more. I'd like to pay you 120. You'll just jump on the deal and you'll be all excited. But is this really true nusх for al-khalq? Is it really wishing people the same you wish for yourself? Wouldn't you want someone to alert you if you're unaware of the value of your property? So true nusх lil-khalq. And then Jarir, they asked him, what are you doing? And he said, bay'atu Rasulullah sallallahu ala nushi likulli Muslim. I gave the bay'ah to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, pledged allegiance to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. One of the conditions of the bay'ah is nusх, which is well-wishing. It is basically to wish them the same that you wish for yourself. It's well-wishing or wishing well-being for every Muslim. Now, so, but at the end of the day, the Jarir did not really was not really concerned with the legal value. Is this makruh? Is it makruh tanzihi? Is it makruh tahrimi? Is it wajib, mustahab? But if it is wajib, is there a way out of it? And and all of that stuff. It's just like, they really did this with love. And that is tadallul. It is tadallul with love to the awamir, to the commands of Allah. They know that the awamir of Allah, the commands of Allah are good for them. And it is good for them just to submit, to humbly submit to the commands of Allah. So tadallul al-amr is not just conformity. It is not just compliance. It's way beyond compliance. It's compliance without questioning. It's compliance without arguing. It is compliance without, hyper-technicality. It is compliance without pretension. And it is compliance with love. It is compliance with love. والاستسلام للحكم, and then الاستسلام للحكم is surrender to the decrees, and the حكم could be also الحكم الشرعي or الحكم الكوني. So the حكم of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the decrees of Allah could be the awamir, the commands and the prohibitions. These are ahkam also. And they could be the ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His universal decrees, which is sickness, wealth, health, poverty, and everything that happens to us is, of the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you surrender to those decrees. And al-istislam lil-hukm, surrender to the decrees, is not counter to taking precautions, making provisions, doing your best, planning and all of that stuff. But after you had done all of that, as the Prophet ﷺ said, aqilha wa tawakkal, basically tie your camel and rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After you had tied your camel and you had done your necessary work, then you rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you accept what comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's so beautiful. I was, even if you're this is just like a plan of success and a plan of contentment and a plan of happiness, joy in your life. To do your work and then rely on Allah and then accept the whatever decrees Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings down. So you're up for a test, like an important test, your SAT, your MCAT, your this or that, or recertification or your license, to anything. Then you work hard with reliance. You go to to your test with complete reliance, no anxiety, and then you wait for the results. The results come out, whatever they are, you accept them with, contentment, no rejection, and no resentment of the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Isn't that beautiful? If we can just get ourselves to do that, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be, we will work hard, we'll do our best, we will not fail ourselves, but at the same time we're reliant on Allah, and at the end we're accepting of His decrees. That's it. That's all you need in this life when it comes to the ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then وَالِاتِّضَاعُ لِنَظَرِ الْحَقِّ. Al-ittida' from wada'a yada'u, which means to put down. You're down because you know that Allah is watching you. Al-ittida' لِنَظَرِ الْحَقِّ. So under the sight of Allah, can you imagine how, if, in the good old days when you spoke with your father, you would, be shy and you would be respectful and shy and so on. And you don't walk into the presence of your father except with this sort of shyness and respect and humbleness. because your father is watching you, and because you're talking to your father. So you're acting this way in front of your father because he's watching you. Can you imagine if you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you all the time? How would you be acting? You know, so the tada' is basically to put yourself down. It's that brokenness under the sight of al-haq, the true one, the only true one, the truth, the true one. So that's the first level. So if we can just get ourselves to basically comply with that first level, that would be great for us. You know, you're meeting every command with submission and every prohibition with abstention. You're doing this humbly, without arguing, without technicality. You're doing this lovingly, without resentment of the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're accepting all of the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with contentment, and you are broken, not acting broken, but you're actually broken because you are always aware that you're being watched by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you're under the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said, وَالدَّرَجَةُ الثَّانِيَةُ تَرَقُّبُ آفَاتِ النَّفْسِ وَالْعَمَلِ وَرُؤْيَةُ فَضْلِ كُلِّ ذِي فَضْلٍ عَلَيْكَ وَتَنَسُّمُ نَسِيمِ الْفَنَاءِ. The second degree, watching the flaws of oneself, watching the flaws of oneself and one's actions. تَرَقُّبُ آفَاتِ النَّفْسِ وَالْعَمَلِ, watching the flaws of oneself and one's actions. وَرُؤْيَةُ فَضْلِ كُلِّ ذِي فَضْلٍ, observing the virtue of the virtuous above oneself and their favors. Maybe Sheikh Muhammad will, or Sheikh Ahmed, somebody help with the translation here. رؤية فضل كل ذي فضل, observing the virtue of the virtuous above oneself and their favors. رؤية فضل ذي, let's just do them one by one. ترقب آفات النفس والعمل, watching the flaws of oneself and one's actions. It is not just observing them, it's not recognizing them, it is being on the look for them. You're looking out for them, you're watching. ترقب, you're watching. آفات النفس والعمل. آفات النفس, the flaws of the self and the flaws of one's actions. Oftentimes we find it easier to watch the flaws of our actions, but the flaws of ourselves are harder to watch because we're oblivious to the inequities of ourselves and injustices, and we're oblivious to the flaws and the shortcomings of ourselves, and it's hard for us to basically notice them. But people who are really insightful, they can really figure out this. People who are really seeking the pleasure of Allah, they reckon themselves a little harder than the rest of the people. They really hold themselves accountable. They're watching for everything, and they're trying to purify their niyyah, and they're trying to reach higher levels of ikhlas all the time. So those are the people who will be able to discover the flaws of themselves. Part of this also requires knowledge. So reading a lot, particularly the books of akhlaq, the manners, adab, etiquette, the books of purification, tazkiyah, and suluk, tasawwuf. These books are particularly helpful for us to have this awareness, because you really need to become aware. Otherwise, you're not going to be seeing your flaws. A lot of people spend their entire lives not discovering their severe, crippling flaws and diseases of the heart. And they are truly oblivious. They may not recognize them. They're just because they have not sought to purify themselves. They have not sought to discover their own flaws. So this taraqqub afat al-nafs is particularly important. You are looking for the problems that you have. You know that you must have a lot of problems, and you are searching for them diligently. You have basically to come from the perspective of, I am certain I have a lot of problems. Unless you come from that perspective, it will be hard for you to search for your problems. So it will be hard for you to have this taraqqub, watching the flaws of oneself and one's actions. Then he said, وَرُؤْيَةُ فَضْلِ كُلِّ ذِي فَضْلٍ عَلَيْكَ, observing the virtue of the virtuous above oneself and their favors. Fadl, Fadl in Arabic means what? Their virtue and their favors. So it is twofold. And here it means both. So even if you think that Umar ibn Khattab had not done you any favor directly, he had done you a lot of favors, but even if you think he had not done you any favor, you would still love him and recognize his virtue, that he would be deserving of this recognition, this love, this respect, without doing you any favor, just because of his virtues. And then, if he had done you favors also, that would be, a great addition. You don't have to necessarily. Well, Umar had done us a lot of great favors, radiallahu anhu. So, but if you think of like some scholar in some part of the world, and at some point of time you did not read any book by them, and you did not benefit from them directly in any way, you would recognize their virtue above you. But if they had done you favors also, the recognition of their favors and not failing to recognize their favors and praise them for their favors is important. You should never underestimate people's favors on you, even if they were very small favors. Even if they were very small favors. So ru'yat al-fadl here does not only mean that you see the favors, but it also means that you recognize the virtue of people. That until the time comes when you really think that you are the worst of all human beings, sort of like you think that everybody has some virtue above you. And وَتَنَسُّمُ نَسِيمِ الْفَنَاءِ. And the Sheikh, who's always, preoccupied with the concept of fana, rahimahullah ta'ala. Concept of fana, we spoke about this before several times, and we said, part of it is virtuous, part of it is not, part of fana, which is fana al-wujud, leads to hulul al-ittihad, leads to union, divine indwelling, and all of that stuff, and this is, disbelief, a form of disbelief. But he said, Tanassum Nasim al-Fana is embracing the soft winds of Fana. Nasim is the soft blowing wind. That's Nasim. Nasim is the soft blowing wind. Tanassum Nasim al-Fana is embracing the soft blowing winds of Fana, or self-annihilation. Tanassum Nasim al-Fana is basically when you're so close to taming your ego, you are so close to taming yourself and taming your ego, and now you start to smell the fragrance of fana, the virtuous fana, which is like fana al-iradat and fana al-shuhud. It is when your will conforms to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until you have no desire but that which Allah desires. حَتَّى يَكُونَ هَوَاهُ تَبَعًا لِمَا جِئْتُ بِهِ, until his desire is consistent with that which I have brought forth. Prophet ﷺ said that, until his desire is consistent with that which I have brought forth. You don't desire except that which Allah desires. So your desire is vanished, conformed completely with Allah's desires until you have no independent desires from His desires. And that's that, and fana al-shuhud is the vanishment or in the creations in your perception, not in their existence, but in your perception. whereby your actions will all be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the pleasure of Allah. You will not be concerned about who's watching you other than Him, Azza wa Jal. Whatsoever, you're not being concerned about who's watching you other than Him, Azza wa Jal, whatsoever. And that is fana al-shuhud, or the vanishment of perception. So he says that in this second level, you did not get to the third level. That's why he says tanassum nasim al-fana, to basically embrace the soft blowing winds. You're not there yet, but you're just getting some of the fragrance of fana, or self-annihilation at this level. And then he said الدرجة الثالثة حفظ الحرمة عند المكاشفة وتصفية الوقت من مراءة الخلق وتجريد رؤية الفضل. Okay, so الدرجة الثالثة, the third degree or third level. حفظ الحرمة عند المكاشفة, staying respectful during the times of disclosure. Basically, during the times of disclosure, when you have this munajah, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you, discloses Himself to you, in the times of munajah where you truly feel that you're conversing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can you imagine this? Like if you are praying, you're like 2 rak'ahs in the night, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discloses Himself to you in the sense that you feel that you're truly now conversing with Allah. That's mukashafa. And then Allah inspires you to have proper understanding of the words that you're reciting, the Fatiha itself, the treasures of the Fatiha itself. He discloses the treasures of al-Fatiha to you. And every time you're reciting like an ayah, it is giving you like a deeper understanding and a deeper awareness. Certainly greater recognition will always lead to greater love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is basically mukashafa. It is when you have the munajah, which is the subtle, soft conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you feel all of a sudden that you're truly conversing with Allah, and you feel His presence, and then all the treasures will start to open up for you. And all of us will have glimpses of that. Some of us would have a little bit more than others, and some of us would have this more most of the time. Some, many often or less frequently, but it varies. It varies, and it's like a ni'mah from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala that He grants to some of His servants. But then, when this happens, you have to stay respectful, and you have to basically stay within the bounds of servitude. You still recognize your place, your position. You're abd, you're a servant, you're a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You stay within your bounds of servitude, and you stay respectful. And then he said, وَتَصْفِيَةُ الْوَقْتِ مِنْ مُرَاءَةِ الْخَلْقِ, freeing one's time from any pretension, or showing off, ostentation, mura'at al-khalq. Freeing one's time, you're basically, and Ibn al-Qayyim said that this is, that we have to have sort of, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah in Madaarij As-Saalikeen, the book that we rely on mostly for the explanation of this, Madaarij As-Saalikeen by Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. So Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah said that this, at this level, it would be a little strange at this level. This is the third level. These are the people that the topmost or the upper crust. So at this level, we're still talking about purifying our deeds from pretension or freeing one's time from any pretension. At this level, honestly speaking, you would have been doing this from the first level. You would have been trying to purify your deeds from pretension and purify your intention from the first level. But at this level, it is basically to hide some of this, and as one of the righteous predecessors said, and I think it was Sufyan ibn Uyayna, that al-ihsan is basically for your, as was it Sufyan ibn Uyayna, you said ihsan is when your interior is ahead of your exterior. And adl is when your exterior is equal to your interior. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى. So ihsan is when your interior is ahead of your exterior. Your exterior is basically a rush, not. It's basically seeping through, like whatever manifestations that will seep through. That all of this goodness, there is so much goodness inside, and some of it, seeps through your exterior, and that is al-ihsan. So those people, they hide that khushu'. They have this khushu', but they're hiding the khushu' lest the flattery of people and their praise distracts them, or causes them a little bit of ujb or conceit, or hinders them or prevents them from watching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and purifying their intentions. So it is basically proactive ikhlas, not just ikhlas at the time of the action, but it is proactive ikhlas where you're hiding a lot of your goodness and good deeds, so that the flattery of people does not become a distraction for you if they come to know about your good deeds. And that is what part of what he means here by tasfiyat al-waqt min mura'at al-khalq, freeing one's time from any pretension. And the Sheikh may also have, may intend other things as well. But this is what we could understand from what he said. And then he said, وَتَجْرِيدُ رُؤْيَةِ الْفَضْلِ, and observing the grace of God unhindered, purified, alone. Tajreed meaning only, to observe the grace of Allah only. And observing the grace of Allah unhindered, meaning, most importantly, that you're observing it without thinking that you are deserving of any of it, or without feeling any entitlement to it. That's the worst hindrance. That's the first hindrance, is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants you a favor and you feel that you are entitled to this favor, isn't that a huge hindrance? It keeps you from showing gratefulness to the one who granted you the favor, or bestowed this favor on you. Like, let's say you studied really hard, and then you passed like an important test. You come back home and you sort of pat yourself on the shoulder and say, I had really studied so hard, and it's time for me to celebrate the fruits of my work. It is not, I am not saying that your hard study had nothing to do with this. تلكم الجنة أدخلتموها ورثتموها بما كنتم تعملون. Here is paradise. You have been granted it. You have been made heirs to it because of what you have done. So it is, it is true that your actions are a sabab, but watching this sabab, watching this cause, this immediate cause, will hinder you from showing proper gratefulness or the appropriate gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the end of the day, all of what you have done would have not gotten you through this exam. You may have not been able to pass the exam despite all of what you have done. So who's the ultimate effector? Who really got you through the test? At the end of the day, who got you through the test? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, tajreed ru'yat al-fadl, to see the grace of Allah unhindered, would mean primarily you see that you have no entitlement. You do not see any entitlement to it. It is purely a gift from Him. Whatever it is, regardless of how much you worked for it, regardless of all of your planning and all of the provisions that you made, it is purely a gift from Him. Many people that are smarter than you may have not been able to pass the test for one reason or another. Someone may have studied so hard and then just the day of the test they fell sick, or they lost a family member, or something could have happened to them, or they had a mental block. Have you heard of the mental block? So you study hard and you have all the information in your head, and you open the answer sheet, and then all of a sudden, what are they saying? What are they talking about? That's called mental block. People do have this. So all of this is possible. And if you feel any entitlement, that feeling of entitlement is disabling. It really is disabling. It's crippling. It makes you not show shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not be truly a shakur, grateful one. That's it for the chapter of al-khushu'. At the end of this chapter, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah talked about the salah without khushu' and the ruling of the salah without khushu' and whether it would be acceptable or not, whether khushu' is a condition of validity in salah or not. And he mentioned Ibn Hamid from the Hanabila and Abu Hamid rahimahumullah, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, Imam al-Ghazali, and Imam Ibn Hamid from al-Hanabila. They both felt that if you have no khushu' in salah, your salah is invalid. You should actually repeat it. But certainly Abu Hamid al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he said that in his book al-Ihya, but not in his, in any Shafi'i book, al-Wasit or Basit, or any Shafi'i book, because in the Shafi'i books he will have to really abide by the blueprint, the Shafi'i blueprint, and he can't really interpolate stuff of his own, but al-Ihya is his own book. So he said that in his book al-Ihya, that this salah without khushu' is invalid. But he did not say this in his Shafi'i commentaries, because the vast majority of the scholars did not consider khushu' to be a condition of validity. Certainly you have to be aware of the salah that you're praying, you have to be there, and you have to have the niyyah at the time of takbir at least, and so on. But the khushu' itself is not a condition of validity. Yet Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah mentioned their proofs, and he said that these are very strong, legitimate proofs, despite the fact that he sided with the vast majority, that it is not a condition of validity, but he tried to show us the strength of the proofs of Abu Hamid and Ibn Hamid, the Shafi'i and the Hanbali scholars, when they argued that salah without khushu' is invalid and you really need to repeat it, you must repeat it. And they said, some of the proofs were textual proofs and some of the proofs were rational proofs. But one of the rational proofs, they said, if you compromise, one qiyam or qu'ud or this or that or any miniature part of the arkan or the prerequisite of the salah, your salah is all invalid. But if you have no humility, attention, if your heart is completely absent, if you're absent-hearted in your salah, would that salah be valid? So these are some of the rational proofs, but we could apply all of those proofs to the reward of salah versus the validity of salah. Yes, they are right, all of this is applicable, but when it comes to the reward of salah. So we will not ask people who lacked khushu' to repeat the salah, and that is the position of the very vast majority, but we will tell people that you're probably walking away, as the Prophet ﷺ said, with 1/5, 1/4, 1/5, 1/6, 1/10 of your salah, or maybe nothing. If you did not have any khushu' or your heart was completely absent during your prayer. So it is important that we have this khushu', and like I said before, khushu' in salah is really dependent on the khushu' that you'll have outside of salah, because saying Allahu Akbar is not saying Allahu Akbar is not like a switch that you will turn on and off, and once you say Allahu Akbar, that's it, you have khushu'. You're attentive, you're humble, you're submissive, you're calm, you're serene. If you did not have all of this outside of the salah, Allah was not at the center of your attention outside of the salah, how do you imagine, how do you expect that once you say Allahu Akbar, everything will be fixed? It is not. So the path to khushu' inside the salah is having khushu' outside of the salah and keeping Allah in the center of your attention in your entire life, and then your salah will be khashi'ah. The last thing that I wanted to say is, if you really want to understand the meaning of khushu', it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ومن آياته أنك ترى الأرض خاشعة فإذا أنزلنا عليها الماء اهتزت وربت إن الذي أحياها لمحيي الموتى إنه على كل شيء قدير. ومن آياته أن ترى أنك ترى الأرض خاشعة. One of his signs that you see the ard, the earth, the land, khashi'ah, in a state of khushu'. And then when we bring down rain to it, اهتزت, it quivers, warabat, and swells. It gets higher. اهتزت, it quivers, warabat, and it swells. It quivers and swells, becomes higher. So khushu' is opposite to these two qualities. Quivering, movement. So khushu' is about stillness, calmness, and the rabat, to swell, to get higher. So khushu' is about tawadu', humbleness, humility, to be lower, not higher, not to be swollen. Some people have swollen egos and swollen their entire existence is just like swollen. But khushu' is opposite to those two criteria. And who can explain khushu' better than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this ayah truly explains it. So the two words that will explain khushu', if you want two words, it will be humility and calmness. You could add to them submissiveness, attentiveness, fear, and all of that stuff. But the two most descriptive terms of khushu' would be humility and calmness, because they are what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala implied in this verse. اهتزت وربت, it quivers and swells. You should not be quivering and you should not be swollen. So you should be humble and you should be calm. And that is what khushu' means. قل قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم.